Hello and welcome to Defense Watch. The unabating riots across the Muslim world are the result of an anti-Islamic film on YouTube, which in turn was fanned by cartoons of the Prophet in a French weekly. Here in India too, social media was used last month to raise communal tensions in Assam. Facebook and Twitter and SMS messages incited violence in one of the first cases of organized abuse of cyberspace in India. The government was caught unawares, though the lessons of Arab Spring and London riots were there. We are vulnerable to cyber war, cyber terror, and what some call electronic jihad. Whatever the name, the country, including its armed forces, has to be prepared to protect cyberspace, balancing freedom of speech with the need to maintain peace and harmony, essential for internal stability and national security. To look at the different facets of cybersecurity are Dr. Kamlesh Bajaj. He is the director, the CEO of Data Security Council of India, and perhaps one of the leading lights of cyber security in India. Next is Lieutenant General Partha Mahapatra. He is the former Chief of Military Communications in India, and Dr. Cherian Samuel from the IDSA, and he is the member of the Task Force on Cyber Security. Welcome to all. Dr. Bajaj, in India you have about 100 million internet users and about 380 million cell users. Now, India is a highly computerized country, or becoming to be a highly computerized country. So, how does India today figure in terms of cyber security, cyber awareness, and what are the various structures and organizations in place to ensure that any cyber aggression does not take place against us?
Thank you, General Mehta. If you look at the internet, which grew as purely a techies domain, and it is now encompassing every aspect of our life, every walk of life. We cannot conceive life without the internet. It is basically used for everything which is governance application, defense applications, shopping, and so on. And the platforms which are used for delivering such applications, they are vulnerable to attacks, because there are vulnerabilities in the basic software, and this vulnerability is getting more and more proliferated because we are making these applications available on platforms which are more vulnerable, like the smartphones, as you said. Today, with 100 million users and 500 million smartphones getting added to the cyberspace, the vulnerabilities of applications getting proliferated to the smartphones, so the space itself is becoming more prone to attacks. So, we have to talk about, as you rightly said, about education and awareness of the users on the one hand, about what kind of difficulties or problems they can face. It is not merely the virus or worms and so on which are there, but the way they can be delivered, which can cause severe damage, is of a different nature.
Do we have a national policy today as things stand, and what are the organizational structures that fit into this policy?
Today, if you look at Computer Emergency Response Team, CERT-IN as it is called, was the first structure that was created by
you were one of the first directors.
I was the founder director of CERT-IN. That was in the year 2002-03, and CERT-IN has expanded greatly in its role. We have to expand this into a national threat intelligence center, where the kind of attacks which every organization in the country is seeing, they should be able to pass on the information in real time to the proposed National Threat Intelligence Center, hopefully within the CERT-IN or a new entity, I do not know. But then the kind of threat vectors which are there in our cyberspace in India, they should all be collated at one location so that the information can be passed on.
So, what do we have today then?
Today, CERT-IN as an entity is issuing advisories looking at the kind of threats also, but not in totality as it should be, simply because all the networks in the country are not connected to. So, it is on a sectoral basis, you can say, that whatever they have access to, that data is being made available to them. But ideally one would like to see that all sectors in the country which are connected to the internet and all organizations should be able to convey in real time the threats which they are facing, the attacks which are taking place.
And that is happening.
That is happening. What I think one of the recommendations which our report, NASSCOM DSCI report, has made to the government is that we must have a cyber security coordinator at the national level.
Which should be the National Security Advisor?
Under the National Security Advisor.
Under the
National Security Advisor. So that cyber coordinator must coordinate across all the agencies, because as you can see, cyber security is not a technology problem which can be solved by one organization alone. Every ministry, every department has to collaborate.
There are roughly about 18 agencies involved in this at the moment?
At the moment, I don't have the right figure, but then yes, the number of agencies is quite large, but that is not surprising. Anywhere around the world you will see that these multiplicity of agencies is there, but then they have to coordinate. Information sharing is the key to cyber security. As I said, if we build a National Threat Intelligence Center, the data which all of us are seeing in terms of threats.
And finally, what about law? What kind of laws under the Ministry of Information Technology do we have?
See, we have the Information Technology Act, and one of the sections does talk about security. That is, the businesses, the corporates to protect sensitive personal data using reasonable security practices. But then the law is not mandatory for the government departments. So government is holding on to a lot of information. Government can also protect them by declaring them as critical infrastructure under section 70 of the Act.
And that comes under the NTRO?
Under section 70A, an agency has to be notified by the government. Everybody believes it is NTRO, but the notification does not exist as of now.
So what is required is a notification to put the protection of the infrastructure under the NTRO.
Under the NTRO.
Now,
yes.
Samuel, you've also been, like Dr. Bajaj, a part of the task force which has dealt with cyber security recently. Now, we've covered one. I mean, generally we at the macro level, what is the policy, the law. Some of it is still in the pipeline. But as far as social media is concerned, what is the role and what is the control over the social media?
Well, General Mehta, when we looked at at social media as part of our task force report, we realized that it's such a new medium. If you look back, Facebook, for instance, came up only in 2005. Twitter is even more recent than that, 2006. So it's such a nascent medium that you really cannot think in terms of control. What happens when you try to control a nascent medium is that you might end up killing it. So this is not something that we considered in great detail. As far as we are concerned, there are existing laws. It's not as if you have to create new laws to deal with this area. You have, for instance, the IT Act of 2000, which talks about blocking websites and so on in case they are detrimental to public order. So there are already existing laws. There's no real reason to come up with new laws, and it's actually the nature of the beast.
But Google, if I understand, Google has autonomous laws. It guides itself. For example, the White House requested Google to take off this film from the YouTube, but Google refused. But when India asked Google to take off certain material which was inimical to India's interest, it agreed.
Yes, so this is a completely new domain where the rules of the road are still being worked out.
Yes, Kamal.
Yeah, you see, Google in this particular case did not remove the content. It did not take down the content. What it did was blocked it for the Indian viewers. Whereas in the case of US, it is protected under the First Amendment to the Constitution, where freedom of speech is supreme. So under that,
two things
they can even
the United States are supreme. One is to own a gun, and the other is freedom of speech.
Freedom of speech. So under the freedom of speech, anybody can preach anything except child pornography. In fact, even terrorism and so on can be preached there. Nobody will stop that. So Google has not taken down the content of the, for example, the current.
But the effect is the same, whether you block it, you take it.
No, blocking is not complete ever. It is porous. In India also, any content which is blocked, you can find ways of circumventing that and going and looking at that particular content.
So did they make a concession for India then?
You see, blocking is something which they will agree to under our section 69, which will cause, for example, law and order problems, sovereignty issue, friendly relations with the foreign governments and so on. Under those conditions, if there is a court order, then many of these sites will actually agree for blocking the content.
Okay. So coming back to you then, so you've talked about how new this subject is and how difficult, as we've just discovered, it is to exercise control over internet and management of these internet providers. So where do we go from here then?
Well, what you see happening is, for instance, the Ministry of Home Affairs trying to do what it does in the offline world, in the online world. So if there's a riot somewhere, the MHA would normally have a curfew and stage a flag march. In the same, almost in an equivalent way, it's trying to block, as Dr. Bajaj said, content on the internet. But that does not really, because for every link that goes down, another link comes up with the same content. So the government actually has to work with the companies. They're both on the same side, though right now it looks like.
Now, what is the Cyber Surveillance Agency?
Cyber surveillance, well, after the most recent events, the government in Assam, the government came up with a three-pronged strategy, one of which was to set up a cyber monitoring system, including surveillance by the intelligence agencies and other agencies, then to strengthen the laws, and thirdly to do more in terms of research and development. Whether this is enough, whether the government by itself can do this is a more question.
Have these edicts have they been put in place? For example, are laws in place now? Because nothing happens so fast in India, I don't believe so.
Yes, because I mean, if you look at Facebook, for instance, it's got 54 million users in India, 5 billion page views a month. You take Twitter, 340 million tweets are sent to and fro every day. That works out about 4,000 tweets a second. How do you actually sit down and monitor this kind of? So it's the sheer scale of it that makes it difficult to actually implement something like this, which is where I think that the government and the companies really have to work together.
So this is all work in progress.
Pretty much so,
all
and
right.
Not just in India, but
General
everywhere.
Mahapatra, let me come to you now. Quite a different domain in the sphere of defense and security. Now, the armed forces, when they fight a conventional war, they are known to they envisage fighting a network-centric war. Now, this network-centric war will be highly cyberized, fought in space, fought in the ground, in all the dimensions. So, my first question to you is that what is the threat and what are the countermeasures that are being taken in the defense field to combat these threats in conventional war, and second, what is happening in low intensity conflict in Jammu and Kashmir, for example. Let's take the first.
Okay, first let me try and explain as to how the nature of warfare is changing to net centricity. Earlier we had the platforms like the tanks, guns, missiles, sensors, aircraft and ships, which used to be used to wage wars. Now, it was not that they were not linked, but that link was quite tenuous. Of late, with the advent of information technology, what has happened is that the nature of warfare itself is veering towards a net-centric warfare. Now, when we talk about net-centric warfare, what it implies is the following. The first is that you have a very much speedier decision-making process. You have transparency of the battlefield, you have situational awareness, you have your precision munitions getting to the target where they intended to go. You have focused logistics, and overall you have the ability to have mission effectiveness of the force. So, considering this net centricity where we are all heading, I am not by any chance stating that any country in the world, including the US, is today a net centric force, but what I am saying is we are all heading towards it, and this entire thing being digitized is in the domain of the cyber.
So what are the threats then?
So the threats are that in case there is a cyber attack on any of our networks, everything that I have said earlier gets affected. Your mobilizations get affected, apart from the effects on financial and the other infrastructural sectors. Your mobilization gets affected, your communications may get partially or wholly disrupted, your precision guided munitions or missiles will not go where they are supposed to be going, your avionics of aircrafts will get.
So this is cyber aggression.
This is, yes, this is cyber aggression. This is the threat.
Because in the case of the last war between Russia and Georgia, the Russians were able to disable the complete air defense network of the Georgians by the cyber war.
Yes, because
and then
because they utilized what is known as the distributed denial service attack, DDoS attacks, and by spreading botnets throughout their networks, they were able to disable this.
They injected a virus.
Yes, which spread.
They spread the virus.
Yes.
Now tell me, in today in Jammu and Kashmir, for example, how is cyber threat and cyber war or cyber terror being used by the terrorists to affect our operations?
Well, I would, it's a matter of semantics, but I would like to call it the utilization of cyberspace by terrorists as far as J&K and our northeast is concerned. Now, in this utilization of the cyberspace, what they are essentially doing is indulging in recruitment, to some extent funding of the terrorists, and more importantly for coordination and communications between the terrorists themselves. I will give you a small example which was reinforced when Headley made the when Headley was interrogated and he gave a statement. Now we have got a computer, there is a system of putting a draft on the computer. Now when you put a draft in the computer, you don't have to send out the message. Now the terrorists were using this methodology with all the protagonists of the terrorist act having access to the password. Now what happens then, that without sending out the message, which is liable to be intercepted by law enforcement agencies, each one of them is able with the password to view that particular message which is saved in the draft, and this was used during 26/11 and even earlier on occasions. So it is